Mac back to discuss. Mac, this Minnesota team, perfect 5-0. You lose 2 games. Obviously, the only task is to get back in the win column. You look at the box score, some numbers might suggest that this was sound effort. Sam Darnold, 28 of 34, 290, 3 touchdowns. However, 2 interceptions, some costly mistakes in the first half. Was this version of Minnesota, did this make you feel better the way you did the first 5 weeks about this team?
It made me feel good because they needed to win. In the midst of a 2-game losing streak, that was, not the Viking-like football that we witnessed in the first month of the season. So that's a plus. Now, when you look at how they won this ball game, there's still some things they need to improve on. I really love what I saw from Brian Flores-led defense today. They got back to the exotic looks, putting pressure on Joe Flacco, making life miserable for him in the pocket, sacking him. That's what they did in the first month and a half of the season. The last 2 ball games, we didn't really see that consistently, so that's a plus. Offensively, Justin Jefferson doing Justin Jefferson-like things. That's a plus. Jordan Addison finally showed up as well outside of his first game returning from injury. That's a plus. The negatives were Sam Darnold. We saw good Sam, we saw bad Sam. In the beginning of this ball game, we saw bad Sam. When you look at his numbers, of course, he had 3 touchdowns. Those were huge, but 3 total turnovers as well. 2 interceptions, 1 fumble, 1 was returned for a touchdown.
And to your point about the defense, that was the only touchdown Indianapolis scored in this game.
The only touchdown that Indy scored. So playing sloppy football like they did tonight, the Vikings that is, they can get through and still be a winning team against a team like the Colts.
Yeah.
But their eyes are bigger. They're set on bigger prizes for the Vikings when you talk about at one point in time being 5-0 sitting at the top of your division. So this is a learning experience for them. Luckily enough for the Vikings, those mistakes did not hurt them in terms of losing this ball game.
Yeah, I'm not sure this effort gets you past the Packers, who they've already beaten this season, nor the Lions, who they've already lost to this season. Those are going to be who we measure Minnesota against, quite obviously, in that division. You bring up Joe Flacco, and I'm looking at the numbers, 16 of 27, 179, no touchdowns, and interception. Was there anything in this 60 minutes of football that Anthony Richardson is not capable of? I know the situation is not as black and white as that. It is far more nuanced. The tap on the helmet, pulling himself out. Let's give the kid a breather, let him see the game from the sideline. But nothing Joe Flacco did on this night leads you to believe that Anthony Richardson won't have another opportunity.
And that's the thing. I felt like benching Anthony Richardson was a bit premature. Granted, he's played bad football, right? And taking himself out of the ball game didn't help him. But give him a chance. Allow him to learn from his mistakes, because you talked about it, Joe. Is there anything differently Anthony Richardson could have done? Maybe run the football.
Yeah.
Maybe buy time and make people miss. He's a more athletic quarterback. He's speedy. He's bigger. He's a guy that doesn't mind mixing it up in the running game. Maybe that could have helped. But now when you watch them make that quarterback move, what is next for the Colts? Do you go back to Anthony Richardson? Because you're kind of playing coy with the young fella. How can he evolve in the National Football League if he's in and out of the lineup? How can he establish a rhythm? Coach him up. The best way you can coach a guy up is by allowing him to get reps, and also, too, highlighting the things that he's doing wrong so he can become a better player.
This is an Indianapolis team that is hanging in the balance right now following this result, and where they move forward and who they move forward with will be very interesting. But I think maybe if you're going to give Richardson a game or 2, this was one, because you mentioned the Brian Flores defense.
Yeah.
If you're not seeing it, if you're not identifying it, this is one of the last defenses you want to be going up against. Talk to me more about this defense. What makes them so difficult to defend? You come from a defensive system that also leaned on exotics. What does that do? How does that stress a team? And how sustainable is that over the course of a season? Like, if I'm a guy who does see it and can process it, and I'm looking at film, can I figure out where it's coming from? Or Dick LeBeau, B-Flow, they know how to disguise that stuff.
That's the thing. When you see it on film, it looks easy than when you see in real life, ground level, right? For you guys watching the television, you might see it, and you're seeing it from an angle of understanding and knowing, yeah, this guy is probably coming. But you got to realize quarterbacks see it from ground level, and they're only seeing one legit picture, which is behind the offensive line. But we see it from the sideline view. We see everything. They don't, and they can't determine the depth of certain secondary guys because they're seeing it from the ground view from the back of the offensive lineman. So when you look at Brian Flores, what he does is try to manipulate quarterbacks. You know, he tries to have every hat in every gap. So now it's not just about confusing the quarterback, but it's also about confusing the offensive lineman. Because every offensive lineman, where there's a hat in the gap, you got to account for that guy. You got to account for him potentially rushing. And you got to make sure there's a guy that's willing to pick him up and he understands who he's supposed to pick up. But what happens if there's another guy coming from another gap that's not actually in the gap? So that's the thing, is about kind of the offensive alignment and making sure you understand when you play this offense, every look that you see, there's probably a counter look to that said look as well. And we've seen some teams try to pick up on some of the things that they were doing, and that's the thing I love about the National Football League, because the adjustments that these coaches can do. Remember how successful Brian Flores' defense was in September. The book wasn't really out on them. The tape wasn't really out. We're still seeing success, but it's not as dominant as it was in September compared to late October.
It definitely looks different, both offensively and defensively, excuse me, for Minnesota from that 5-0 Sam Darnold MVP conversation. This is the top of the NFC North, maybe the top of the NFC. Sometimes you get out in front of yourselves a little bit. I think we have a clearer picture here now as we pass the halfway mark in Week 9. Let's look at the NFC North and that NFC playoff picture, because we got a nice data point with Detroit going on the road, winning at Lambeau in the elements, something we were trying to figure out if they could do. Obviously, Chicago takes a massive step back these last 2 weeks. It appears to be a 3-team race, if it's even a race in that division, with how good Detroit is playing. If you are power ranking the teams in that division right now, it goes Detroit and then fill in the blanks.
In that division, I'll go with...
I'm asking you who's better, Packers or Vikings, because you're looking at two good football teams, a dinged-up quarterback in one case.
That's the thing. I'll take Minnesota because of the health concerns to Jordan Love. Well, if healthy, I think the Packers are right there with, could be right there with the Detroit Lions, but Jordan Love played with a strained groin today. It wasn't too much he can do against that type of team. He needed to play against a team like the Saints or the Panthers to be able to get through. You're playing against the Lions in those conditions, it can be a bit sticky. But Minnesota, they're right there, and they can kind of control their own destiny. That's why this game was so important, because losing to a game like the Colts that you're better than could really hurt you moving forward, because you're going to get into the midst of your divisional schedule. And yes, we see struggles with Chicago, but they're a competitive team as well, especially when you look at their defense. So tonight was overly important. Number one, you were in the midst of a 2-game losing streak. Number two, you're playing against a team that you're better than. Any given Sunday, anything can happen, but let's keep it real. Minnesota, they were a better ball club than the Indianapolis Colts. More talent on either side of the football field, and they needed to find a way to win, and they did.
Again, they've beat the Packers, they've lost to the Lions, already Minnesota in that divisional schedule. So if we are slotting them in a playoff position, which they have earned that right, and if we're going to say that maybe the Lions keep that upper hand, and they are a wild card team, you're going to be looking at a divisional champion in the playoffs. Does this team have the infrastructure? Does this team have the pieces in place to develop into a true contender come playoff time?
Minnesota?
Yes.
They do. They need to get more out of the quarterback. The quarterback can either help their chances or hurt their chances. I understand they're dealing with some injuries on the offensive line, losing Christian Darrisaw, big-time loss. Cam Robinson jumped in, did a pretty good job considering he's only been there not even a full week. But Sam Darnold can hurt their chances, because look at tonight's matchup. He was putting them in positions to lose this ball game. Carelessness with the football, not seeing the football field well. Those things can hurt. The reason why we're so hyped about Detroit is because, yes, they have everything else you want. Running the football, wide receiver play, defensive play. They take care, Jared Goff.
They take care of that pill.
Jared Goff. The great teams that have significant runs in the postseason, their quarterbacks, they're not a liability. They're an asset. And tonight's ball game, parts of it, Sam Darnold became a liability.
First half, no points, 2 missed field goals. That's not on him, but drives not ending in the end zone.
And this was the first time we really see Sam Darnold kind of revert back to the Jets. Sam Darnold. It were moments where it was like, Sam, what are you doing? And he got to get that out of his system, because you talked about what we raved about with him in the month of September. It was because he was making plays, but he was protecting the football. You got to protect the football.
We will delve deeper as the weeks pass on. In this NFC playoff picture, it's going to be closely contested, especially as it pertains to seeding. You are seeing some space between those on the inside and those on the outs. BMAC, always got us on the inside of all the conversations. We take a look here at the AFC playoff picture following this loss.
I love that picture.
A costly one. I know you love that picture. A 3-seed, huh? 6-2. Yeah. Steelers on the bye. Yeah. They win the bye? Did they win? I mean, I know you got your ear to the ground.
We're getting healthier, so yes,
we won. That's how you win the bye.
Yes, sir.
Colts now 4-5 following this loss and on the wrong side of the line. Playoff picture taking form. Say hello, Week 10.